to the possible auction of this quite outstanding collection of paintings from the golden age of English landscape art, which I have worked on and assembled over the last 30 years and gathered together a huge amount of evidence which supports their authenticity to John Constable. I would have to relate the difficulties, to put it very mildly, I have had with the Constable specialists, the appointees by the London Art Establishment, on the supposed authenticity of Constable's works. As Professor Martin Kemp said recently, who is a professor at Oxford University, the lawlessness in so much of attributing important works is really quite serious. And that is exactly what I found with regard to this collection. There are 5 different Constable specialists, and I'm afraid over this 30-year period I have found, to my great sorrow and cost, that they are simply, in modern political parlance, not fit for purpose. From there, the sad pantomime leads me to the 2 principal London auctioneers, to whom I submitted this detailed commentary which presented all the huge amount of evidence which supported the works, technical, compositional, stylistic, and in the case of the landscapes, topographical. And I'm afraid the commentary was treated amazingly like Banquo's ghost. It simply did not exist, which is really quite incredible. I was driven then to get in touch with my local MP, who then contacted the then Labour Minister for Culture. They both put my very strong criticisms, to put it very mildly, of my treatment by the person at the Tate, who was then the Constable specialist, who had treated the whole commentary appallingly and said, unbelievably, grotesquely, that these works have no relation to Constable's works. When I wrote back through the MP and the ministers to say, well, how does she explain that on just 7 of the paintings, 20 different connoisseurs, independent, impartial connoisseurs, had all immediately seen a resemblance to Constable's works? Answer, there was none. A thunderous silence. And that really sums up the whole pantomime of Constable, the lawlessness of Constable's supposed expertise. I'd now like to present just some of the pictures. Obviously there are long stories to be told on each painting, but on this particular one it's certainly undoubtedly of John Bagot Pearson, and it's one of Constable's very earliest portraits after he left the Royal Academy. So many people, experts, even John Constable's great-great-grandson, Richard Constable, when he saw a reproduction, said, you must pursue it. He immediately saw that it certainly could be by John Constable. And it is a brilliant standing portrait, as can be appreciated. There were so many other connoisseurs who also supported it. Lionel Lambourne at the Victoria and Albert, Charles Rhine, immediately when he saw a reproduction, thought it was a genuine Constable. But there are so many. It's a long story, and of course there are stories on each one. This is the first landscape in the collection and one of the most brilliant. It's clearly a plein air sketch, one of his very earliest, about 1810. And the extraordinary thing about the painting is that two Suffolk mill experts have confirmed that the windmill shown in the painting was Brantham Mill, which was owned by Constable's father, and in which John Constable himself worked as a youth. The mill was demolished in 1825. Now, who, before 1825, to anybody who has any appreciation of Constable's works, could be a candidate for the work? There are none. And really, that closes the argument. It's really puts the matter to rest. But, of course, the Constable specialists have closed their mind to that, as have the auctioneers. This is the second landscape, and quite amazingly, it's of the same Brantham Mill. Demolished, as I say, in 1825 and confirmed by a Suffolk mill expert as Brantham Mill. Years ago, I met a fine countryman in Suffolk who actually owned a post mill, which is what this represents. A post mill turns in the wind on a triangular or brick base. Now, this friend in Suffolk wrote to one of the Constable specialists who lived actually in Suffolk and sent a photograph to him. He wrote back and said that he thought it was by an imitator, even though the expert, in inverted commas once more, said that he agreed that it was Brantham Mill. And yet the man did not know or appreciate that the mill was demolished in 1825. How possibly could it have been by an imitator? My friend wrote back, and of course there was no reply. This is clearly another painting of a windmill, again a post mill. And this is what was called the black mill to differentiate it between the white mill, which also stood behind Constable's boyhood home at East Bergholt. Between the windmill and Constable's home is open land and still remains so. The windmill was actually demolished sometime before 1816. Again, the question has got to be asked, who then could have possibly be a candidate before 1816? Although in rather too elaborate and not a period frame, this particular landscape is really, in my view, possibly the very finest landscape to have been discovered in the last 50 years. It really is a superb work. It really needs no words to describe it with those magnificent summer clouds, the full trees, the shade, the whole atmosphere has been captured absolutely brilliantly. And it is a very early painting, as one can appreciate when one sees it in fact and examines the canvas and the stretcher. It is definitely pre-1820. It's, I would say, 1816. And after no less than five visits, because I was so convinced the scene had to be in Constable country, I made 4 or 5 visits until finally I discovered the exact spot where it was painted, only 1.5 miles from Dedham, Langham Ford on St Edmund's Way. And that was really a eureka moment, because the question has to be asked once more, who, if not by Constable, who else could possibly have painted such a magnificent scene? This is a tiny work, as can be appreciated, and it's in a frame which is really not wholly suitable for it, being much later, but the picture itself is an absolute diamond, an absolute gem, and once again it's in a place identified in Constable country. It portrays Flatford Cottage and bridge. Of course the bridge has been slightly altered to make it fit into such a small painting, but undoubtedly the cottage with its thatched roof and thatched lean-to, and even showing the well in the garden, which can be seen in other drawings by Constable. One interesting aspect about it, apart from the brilliance of the picture, is the appearance of the little lady in a red shawl and black bonnet, which can be seen in this painting and in the following one. Quite amazingly, in 7 other paintings by Constable, the same lady in the red shawl and black bonnet appears, as it was noted that so often Constable wished to put in a flash of red in his paintings, as he did on the harness of horses. This again is quite a small work. It's on paper laid onto canvas, and it relates very strongly to a painting which is in the Mellon collection in America of, I'm sure, the same, showing the same tree but from the other side of the fence. When this painting was shown to the person at the Tate, she actually scribbled on a brief commentary submitted to her with an arrow pointing toward the fence under the line of trees, questioning what she actually asked, is this doing in this setting? The woman asked why a fence was in a rural setting under a line of trees. One really holds one's hands up in amazement. I mean, what did the woman actually think a fence did in the country? When I pointed out to her that in the Mellon collection, the painting which relates very much to this one, as I say, from the other side of the fence, this painting, which also of course shows a fence under a line of trees, I wrote and said, would she write to the curator at the Mellon collection and ask the same, I'm sorry to say, idiotic question. Once again, we've got an example of the expertise, the competence of the appointees of the art establishment.